This is NEGOTIATEx TV.
And as we talk about this, I just have like vivid memories. I used to be what was called an observer coach trainer at JRTC at Fort Polk, Louisiana. If you live anywhere near Fort Polk, Louisiana, I am so sorry, because that was a long 4 years of being like next to nothing. Anyways, I remember, there's always just continuous missions that the unit that's going through this training always has to keep planning for, to be able to have a plan so that when the time came down to it, they have something to go off, right? And so in the military, we have this thing called the military decision-making process. And generally, the executive officer, so the number two in command for an organization, he or she controls the military decision-making process. And so it's a bunch of steps that the staff is essentially going to work through until they end up with the plan of how they're going to accomplish this, right? And in that process, the XO has the ability to expedite certain areas, maybe slow down other areas. And it basically all comes down to how much risk do they want to take during the plan that they're creating, right? If you don't consider the enemy, then that's a big risk, because the enemy's always going to have a vote. And so if you decide to overlook that part of the plan, it may not go that well for you. And I think that's kind of the same thing that we're seeing here, is if you are time constrained, you've really got to focus on where your risks are and make sure that you at least think through that process if you're going to, look over some of the other steps, glaze over some of the other steps to really get to an outcome, if it is truly a time-sensitive negotiation. How's that sound? Is that inaccurate?
Well, it's really accurate. And let's just use this as an opportunity, kind of a springboard here, to talk about risk, because a lot of people will say, well, if there's any risk involved at all, well, then I shouldn't do it. And I would caution us to maybe just say, let's shift that thinking a little bit. And if we can do what you're saying, hey, this is a great opportunity. And to meet it, we're going to have to streamline things. We still want to remain disciplined. Let's not just pretend like those risks don't exist. Let's talk about risks in a couple of ways, though. Let's first of all talk about risks in terms of what is the probability that they're going to occur. Because even if it's like, well, that's a risk, yep, and it's got a really little probability of occurring. Okay, and what's the magnitude? If it happens, is it hitting the news line tomorrow, or not? Right? Is it not a headline sort of event? Is it not catastrophic to us and to our business and everything else? So probability and magnitude first. And then with that in mind, and as we're getting into options, saying, hey, well, we do have some concerns. How do we develop solutions around things to mitigate and manage risk, and both with regards to probability and magnitude? What can I do? What could you do? What requests could I make of you to help with the risk management piece? What could we do together? How do we pool our collective resources? Now, all of a sudden, between what you, and we can do with regards to both probability and magnitude, we come up with 6 ways, right? Do the math, 2 times 6, 2 times 3, 6. So six things we can discuss to manage what is potentially a huge concern, interest around time and moving quickly, that can help generate better solutions, and still allow us to maybe move forward, given the opportunity we see.
Yeah. And I think that's huge, is just really evaluating the risk and not necessarily being so risk adverse that you're not willing to potentially go through with something. I think that's huge there. I think this kind of goes back to, if I were advising anyone, or I was going into a hasty negotiation, there is one tool that I would bring with me, and I would at least make sure that I spend enough time thinking through it, even if I don't have enough time to write everything down. And that's the NEGOTIATEx prep tool. Bunch of different names throughout the negotiating world, but this is a tool where you can organize your thoughts, and it's going to help you really think through the risks that you may not be seeing just by through, initially brainstorming this negotiation, right? So I think that's just huge to at least be able to think through all of the steps and truly identify where that risk is. Is there anything else that's helpful there, Aram?
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. I think that the only other two things I might add to the idea of getting, still brainstorming, even if it's kind of streamlined, or getting prepared, even if it's streamlined, would be one, you're going to be able to respond to time much better if you've had the opportunity, whether it's with the external party, maybe perhaps that this negotiation is with, to have addressed relationship and built trust and rapport over time. If that exists, then the ability to negotiate under great time pressures is that much greater. And if it's a new external relationship, but your internal dynamics are really well oiled, right? Because you've invested in the relationships there, and there is trust and understanding and good protocols in place. Well, you're also going to be able to execute really well. And so I'd like to think of the idea that I can be preemptively prepared for opportunity when both relationship but also the management of my processes, good communication, are well established beforehand.
Yeah, I think all of those are extremely important and something that's not going to happen overnight. So, um, making sure you're taking the proactive steps to get there with your team, with your counterparts, is something you got to focus on. Anything else we want to cover for this, Aaron?
I'm just going to throw out one of my favorite quotes because as you're talking just now, you made me think of it. Louis Pasteur said, "Chance favors the prepared mind." So the more preparation you can already carry with you, whether that is preparation around what the issue is going to be, or preparation in terms of the dynamics and the situation in which you're negotiating, or the way in which you're going to walk into the negotiation, even when it's just a pop-up negotiation, you will be more successful. And if your mindset has been kind of honed and trained and developed before you ever get into that situation.
With that, this is a podcast that is all about taking action in your business, in your life. So, Aaron, what action items do we have for our listeners from today's episode?
Sure. Time is a real factor in negotiations. You're going to have some things that pop up in the world in which we live, because we're not living in a static world, but a very kind of diverse and engaging world. So we got to be able to respond well to time constraints. Time should not drive us to reverting back to bad behaviors. Rather, we should stay disciplined. We need to be able to identify the nature of problems and still prepare where appropriate to address, even when under tight time constraints. And we are going to have to be aware of assumptions we're making, especially regarding risk. And rather than just being risk adverse, if we can have those discussions in the moment and really break down risk into these two different components of probability and magnitude, we can find, up to 6 different kind of ways to have that conversation with our counterpart around what we can do, what they can do, and what we can do together to address those things.
Yeah, and I think having the NEGOTIATEx prep tool in your notebook, if you have one, if you're still old school and carry a notebook, to have it inside of this so that if you're ever in a time constrained negotiation, you have the ability to at least look at the prep tool where you can think through all the different aspects of the negotiation that we highly advise you think through. And as Aram said, you'll be able to identify where the risks may be. And at the end of the day, you're the leader who gets paid the big bucks to identify those risks and come up with creative solutions. So again, that's just a tool to help you do that. Hey, thanks for checking out this video on NEGOTIATEx TV. If you found any value at all, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification icon if you want to be notified of future videos. And then we also have a couple videos over here that you might be interested in checking out. If you and your small business, your team, are looking to get negotiations or leadership training, then you can head over to NEGOTIATEx.com and learn more about the coaching services we offer. Thanks, and I'll see you over in the next video.